Today's forum is sponsored by Columbus State Community College, who's represented today by David Harrison, David, and his colleagues from Columbus State, and also Columbus State Community College Foundation, represented by Pam Bishop and her colleagues. Please thank them both for their support. Now I'd like to welcome David Harrison, who, by the way, is president of Columbus State Community College, to the microphone to introduce today's panel.
Thank you, Rich. Good afternoon, everybody. Columbus State and the Columbus State Foundation are delighted to partner with the Columbus Metropolitan Club to sponsor this education series, and I really appreciate the CMC for taking this issue to heart and the prominent place that we think it deserves in this community. Columbus State's delighted to be a part of it. We are the front door to higher ed for most Central Ohioans, and it's a role that we take very seriously. We are one of the largest community colleges in the nation. In fact, this Friday we will graduate the largest graduating class ever at Columbus State Community College. Thank you for that. People ask me about my enrollment all the time. What I'm really interested in is talking about my graduates, so thank you for allowing us to do that. One of the things I love about doing what I do in this region is there's a spirit of collaboration that I think is unsurpassed anywhere in America. I've been in enough different places to recognize the difference. And on your chairs, there's reference to an initiative called the Central Ohio Compact, and that is a design strategy with K-12 partners and college and university partners in our region to help more students not just go to college, but come to college prepared, earn college credit while in high school, and transfer successfully from community college to university or transition into high-performing jobs. So the Central Ohio Compact is something that needs to be on your radar if it isn't already, and wanted to take the opportunity to point that out to you. We are lucky today to have two of really the most important education leaders in Ohio here with us. First, want to introduce our moderator, Mark Reel. Mark is president and CEO of kidsohio.org, but is probably, I would say, as influential in helping kids succeed as anybody in Central Ohio. Often behind the scenes, often coaching people like me and bringing data to our attention and really helping to understand what's really going on in the lives of kids. Mark has been a personal friend in my 3 years in Columbus, and I'm delighted to introduce our moderator, Mark Reel. Please join me. And then we're very fortunate to have our speaker today, Ohio Superintendent of Public Instruction, Richard Ross. Dick, prior to that role, Dick was the governor's chief education advisor. And prior to that, he was superintendent at Reynoldsburg Schools for many years. I mentioned the Central Ohio Compact and the spirit of collaboration. That exists in no more prominent way than in our partnership with Reynoldsburg Schools. And I know Steve Dakin, their superintendent, is here today. But there's a spirit of innovation that exists there that I think the gentleman to my left gets all the credit for. There's a bias toward action. There is a spirit of entrepreneurship that really matters, and it all comes down to helping kids be more successful, and I know that's how Dick has spent his career. So it's my great honor to introduce to you State Superintendent Richard Ross.
Thank you, David. Appreciate that introduction. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. As I've met so many people today, it's like old home week, all my old friends that I've met out here today, but it's certainly a pleasure to be with you and share this opportunity to share some thoughts I have about improving Ohio's education system. I do want to tell you that I'm a product of a family that believed in education. I'm a product of myself because of a teacher who believed in me. I grew up on a farm in northwest Ohio. My father received his master's degree at the Ohio State University, which was kind of unusual back in the 1940s for a farmer. And set an expectation for me about education, but he passed away my senior year in high school. And so, you know, being a typical 18-year-old, I was thinking about nice cars and, you know, get a job and start buying a nice convertible or something back in won't say the date. But I had this teacher, this special teacher for me. It was my Latin teacher in high school. Coming from a small rural school, amazingly, Latin was the only foreign language that we had back then, and I was not the biggest supporter or advocate, or even, as Sarah Dove says, not very competent in Latin. But this teacher took a kindly view of me and kind of liked me, and so when I started talking about working in alternate spots, she gave me two things. She gave me a gift, monetary, and a direction, inspiration, kick in the seat of the pants to go to college and get started. And I just want to tell you that if it hadn't been for this one high-quality teacher, this teacher that reached out to me and saw something in me, then I would never have had the chance to help improve the education system of Ohio and as the governor's educational advisor, or standing here today as the state superintendent of public instruction. So frame everything you hear from me with my appreciation for what I have for the classroom teachers that are doing it across this state. There's no one more important than the quality teacher in our classrooms. So all my thoughts about improvement are going to be focused on that. Because good teachers move the needle. They make the difference. We have 1.8 million boys and girls in our public schools that need to learn and achieve. And, you know, I know Steve's here, and I'm going to pick on him later. I led Reynoldsburg schools for 20 years by relentlessly focusing on student achievement. Because I felt if we weren't completely fulfilling the learning needs of our boys and girls, then we really had no reason to be there. But I want to tell you about Reynoldsburg, and some of you know it, but Reynoldsburg was my town. I lived there for 20 years. My family was there. My son was raised in Reynoldsburg. And my son, Bo, who's a highly successful salesman, an OSU graduate, a student of Herb Asher's, went to school there. But I want to tell you a little story, a couple, about Bo. Bo takes a little bit after his father. He's a little ADD sometimes. And so there were some issues at school that would come up because he didn't see the connection between school and what he was going to do later on. Just didn't see it. He didn't get it, and that's part of ADD things. But so he had some issues in the classroom. And Steve, I know you know the day. Where's Steve? I went in, I heard some things about my son, and I was a little upset, and I wanted to talk to him. Steve, remember when I came in and asked to see if I could talk to Bo? You couldn't find him. Bo is a chip off the old block, I'm going to assure you. But making sure that kids like Bo were learning at high levels was not a job for those faint of heart, because it wasn't an engagement. It had to be solicited. I mean, it's not something he naturally aspired to, even though he's since succeeded. But Bo certainly wasn't Reynoldsburg's biggest challenge. And during the years I spent there, Reynoldsburg saw big change in community culture, big challenges in the economy, and we had huge problems to solve. And I always refer to it as wonderfully messy. It was just a wonderfully messy place to be, and we could engage. But I was determined that we're going to succeed. And you know what I did? I cultivated a determined, can-do staff of principals, teachers, who believed that the most important thing, every child can learn. Not just verbalizing it, but acted on it, believed it in their hearts. And that's the first key step. We look for ways to increase teaching and program efficiencies with one goal in mind, making sure Reynoldsburg children graduate from high school well prepared for jobs, college, and other pathways for their success. And over time, we improved Reynoldsburg to be one of the top performing school districts in the state because the boys and girls were a commodity too precious to let languish. And we did it working under the most current state and federal rules, regulations, laws, and policies that govern and still govern public schools in the state. It worked because we never looked at these requirements as roadblocks to change or barriers to change, or what I hear a lot, excuses to change. I won't accept anything short of the performance for all Ohio schools because every child in this state, every child must have a top quality education, no matter what. And I know our school leaders across the state want to, can, and will rise to that challenge. They've done it before. ADD stuff now. They will rise to that challenge. And I know from the experience and thinking about those rules, regulations, barriers, contract restrictions, lack of money, that school leaders sometimes feel like they're in a hammerlock and they can't move. They beg for more money, fewer rules and regulations, better laws and policy. And I experienced all those as superintendent of Reynoldsburg. And to be honest with you, I probably complained about them. Aaron, I probably complained about those rules, policies in Reynoldsburg before I ignored them. The answer was in thinking creatively about how to manage our human and financial capital of our district, how we're going to do that. What I learned and what I want Ohio superintendents, principals, and teachers to know is that the hammerlock is escapable. It is escapable. When leaders analyze and question policies and procedures to see what they really have to do it this way or that way, they usually find they have more flexibility than they think they do. And likewise, getting more money usually doesn't solve the problem. It's well documented additional district spending has little correlation to higher student achievement. I want to tell you, when we were working on some of this, we did a scattergram of spending and student achievement. And you know what it looked like? A massive snowstorm. No correlation between spending and student learning. And I think we need to be mindful of that as we try to raise the expectation for our boys and girls. There probably is minimum levels we need, but to move the needle from where we are really is about creativity and commitment. We saw that high performance, low performance just spread out everywhere. We just need to be smarter about how we spend the money, and for that matter, the talent and resources that we have and how we utilize them. Schools, superintendents, principals, teachers need to shut down expenditures that aren't moving the needle on student achievement. And that's hard to do once you have a program in place. It's hard to do, and we have to do it, and we need to rechannel that money back into classrooms where it's actually going to make a difference. And there's some good ways the districts are beginning to reduce non-classroom expenditures with neighboring districts, shared services. We just heard about Columbus State and the collaboration with the schools in the area. Those are all ways that we can become more cost-effective and utilize our dollars better. But we need leaders that have the courage that'll step forward and say, we need to do this. This may, and I'm thinking about it, and I have a bias about this one, so I've added in even though I was told I shouldn't do this. I always think about kids today, and there's this intergenerational gap because, when I grew up, my grandparents were close by, and so, I had a lot of people trying to keep me in line. Well, in Ohio, we have something called Project More, which is a reading program to help youngsters kindergarten through third grade with senior citizens. Department of Aging is getting thousands of senior citizens across the state to step forward and say, I want to go in the classroom because reading's important. It's those sort of things, and not that it's a complete solution, but it's a step in a way to say, this is important, one of the most important things we do. We can also buy fewer textbooks. It drives me crazy when I see textbooks purchases, but we can't play the blame game. We can't blame or make excuses. They understand if they're not graduating students who are equipped to take on the world, then we're failing, and we need to get creative. And I think that's what's happening right now in Cleveland. Cleveland City Schools has languished for so long that school leaders and officials really don't know how to turn it around. But then Cleveland Mayor Frank Jackson and City Schools CEO Eric Gordon brought together city education leaders, union leaders, business leaders, parents, community support to come up with a Cleveland plan. And the school district's goal for improving quality education for Cleveland's boys and girls became the city's goals. The city's goals. And everyone in the game has had their part in it. They've been involved. The same can be true for Columbus. Mayor Michael Coleman's Columbus Education Commission contains members from all walks of Columbus life. And together they've come up with the Columbus Plan. It's a powerful proposal to do multiple things, some of which are put better materials in the classroom and technology in the classroom, to importantly use consistently data to determine student learning needs so when you're doing instruction that you're on target. Make sure that every child enters kindergarten ready to learn. I'm going to talk a little more about that later. Hire more effective teachers and principals. Improve the neighborhood schools while offering more school choice. I want to tell you, Ohio has always had what we call local control education system, and we need to keep it that way. Local communities must come together and work for change, and powerful forces should be supported. As a state superintendent, I don't want to take over local districts that are failing, but I do want to highlight what works, identify what isn't working, and to push for state-level changes that will strengthen schools and help local school leaders understand what they must do to carry out change in their schools. But there's some weak spots that we need to go after hard in Ohio right now. And first, I think the first and most is that we need high-quality teachers. And I've talked to you about my core beliefs about quality teachers. These high-quality teachers are so connected. They're so connected to learning needs and styles of their student and well-versed in the best teaching practices. They can drive the decisions, the district's decision-making about how to allocate resources. We need them because they can help us be true to the boys and girls in our school. But we can't lose sight of this in contract negotiations, counting decisions, fiscal decisions. These high-quality teachers can also help us close the growing gap in knowledge and skills our own students are graduating with and what Ohio's workforce really needs. Manufacturing jobs, the trades, the professions, all becoming more and more technologically driven. And guess what? We just aren't keeping up. One of the reasons we aren't keeping up is that 20% of our kids aren't graduating from high school. And many of those that do graduate aren't ready to go on from there. Just a figure for you, and I'm sure some of you have heard this, 40% of our public high school graduates in the state who enter Ohio Public University have to take a remedial course in high school education before they can begin college courses. 40% of our high school seniors going into public universities have to take remedial courses. I'm just telling you, this should alarm you because it alarms me. These students, as they start in college, become discouraged and end up not completing college. They don't complete college because they have a lot of debt that may not be even what they wanted to do. It takes longer for them to graduate if they do graduate, and that's longer for them to get into the workforce where we actually need them. But I want to tell you, these problems don't start in our high schools. They begin in the early years, where we have too many poor readers in the primary grades. We know that boys and girls that aren't reading at grade level by the end of the third grade will have trouble comprehending the subject matter they'll encounter after that. Many of these boys and girls, you can almost predict 8 or 9 years from now that they're just going to quietly just not show up to school one day. It's not a conflict, it's not a big deal, they just don't show up. But quite a few of these same boys and girls are struggling reading, they're dropping out, remedial courses. They're in districts in this state that are rated excellent or excellent with distinction. In fact, 60% of our schools in the state are excellent or excellent with distinction. But we're putting policies in place to try to make this a clearer view of what we're really doing with all our students. And we're taking clear steps to raise the expectations for educating all our boys and girls. What are we doing? We're focused on reading problems that stand between our students and learning. Reading. The third grade reading guarantee says school will provide extra help for our youngsters. Identification, intervention in kindergarten, first and second grade. And if they're not reading by third grade, then they need to be kept being taught third grade reading until they catch up and move forward. This is especially important to help Afro-American children and our English language learners, two groups that have the lowest reading scores and, no surprise, the lowest graduation rates. The two are related. We're raising learning expectations. We're going to implement new learning criteria that are better aligned to what our children need for jobs in the field and the workforce. We're making steps to make sure our kindergartners are in school ready to learn. I know that's part of the plan here. You know, the early childhood component, the $70 million race to the top proposal is to try to evaluate publicly funded preschool and early childhood programs in the state, so we can make sure that these youngsters are in quality programs as they enter it, so they can enter kindergarten ready. And I think there's additional funding in the first and second year of the executive budget to try to implement that and reinforce that. We are increasing the standards for teaching. The Ohio Teacher Evaluation System will be in effect for 2014. And it's really the first statewide teacher evaluation system ever in Ohio. I think it's important. We're going to actually base a teacher's performance rating, at least in part, on how much the students have learned. Novel idea. Makes common sense to me. Finally, we're rating schools more realistically. We're going to have an A through F report card so parents will understand more clearly how well their schools are doing. You know, parents know what an A and a B and a C means, and I think that system will expose hidden problems and nuances that exist in school districts that are overlooked. And I want to use an example, and I'm going to pick on Steve because I just loved what he said about this. Last year, Reynoldsburg City Schools, which is headed by Steve Dakin, sitting over here on my right, got an overall rating of excellent with distinction, right? It was under the old measurement system, and they track national attention. They have a visitors bureau to take people through Reynoldsburg now. But last month when I released a simulated report card, Reynoldsburg got a D on something, got a D on the gifted part of their report card. So we peeled back the onions based on the data of the A through F report card. But you know what Steve said? He said he was disappointed with that, and he's going to get to work fixing it. He told them there's no excuse for it because other districts in the area, Hilliard and Upper Arlington, were doing better. But the most important thing that he told them, and I quote, "Anytime the bar is raised in Reynoldsburg, we get there. So I think we can turn a D into an A. Even if we get an A in overall achievement, that's not good enough if we are not achieving with our gifted students at the A level." Ladies and gentlemen, we need educational leaders like that in this state that refuse to accept problems and say, oh, woe is me. They don't care. We have to achieve this grade card. We'll do that. And we need more leaders like Steve Dakin, results-oriented, and to look for ways to knock through barriers, over barriers to get it done. As I look at, and I know I got much time, how am I doing? Ooh. We have to be advocates for our boys and girls, and I want to challenge educational leaders in schools, but I really need you as citizens and community members and parents to challenge your schools in constructive ways. And you can do that by taking the time to learn about teaching and learning, engaging with those schools face to face, finding out how they're addressing those issues, and encouraging them to be proactive. Ask them what schools and districts are benchmarking themselves against. We should benchmark against the very best, just as the business world does. And I think we don't do that enough in education. Benchmarking our subcategories against the highest performing schools and then emulating those schools. Because schools alone, no matter how successful they are, can't be totally responsible for the child in total. They need the help of the community. We need the collective skills, talents, commitments of our communities to help our education system improve and achieve the massive scale it needs to. Because every child in every school, in every community, in every school district in this state deserves the best education to prepare themselves for their careers, jobs, and college. And we need to do a better job of that, and I'm here to help you do that. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Superintendent. And maybe the first thing, we have a lot of business people and a lot of employers in the audience. And we've all read reports where there's a mismatch between the number of jobs that are available and the skills of the employees that are available to fill those jobs. And some of those are middle skill jobs that you hear Columbus State talk about. So talk to us, if you would, about career and technical education and what do we do to close this gap?
Well, a little different, but I have huge interest in career tech. I mean, I think in this country, I've had the opportunity in the governor's office to talk to the German ambassador about how they do it there and the elevation. They have the two planes that are on equal status. The higher ed and career tech are equal in Germany and equally valued and transferable between the two. I think we've not done that as well as we need to in this country. I think our career tech needs to be elevated. I think sometimes, and not to be direct, but I am, career tech sometimes gives out credentials that really are not of significance. You know, it's just kind of, okay, you get a credential. I think that they need to be elevated. You know, one of the things in the executive budget that I worked with was to try to connect a journeyman's certificate from Department of Labor to career tech. So you could say to a mom and dad at 7th and 8th grade, you know, everybody says you got to go to college, but we could say to mom and dad at 7th and 8th grade, well, if you enter this program with career tech, when you graduate, you get a journeyman's license as a plumber, electrician, HVAC. You can walk out of here making $50,000 to $70,000, and guess what? You don't have $30,000. Ohio State, maybe $20,000 debt at Ohio State. So I think it's important. I think that would help us. And I think part of that wouldn't necessarily be without the input and support of the business community helping us prepare for those credentials.
You've taken over the Ohio Department of Education. You've got roughly 500 staff. That department's had a lot of different leaders the last few years. What are your plans for the department?
Well, one of the things, just interesting, because you know I believe in setting goals and expectations, and so the first week or so I went around talking to the floors, the people, and just saying, what do you do? And they told me what they did and how important it was, and I said, well, how does that relate to the mission, goals, and strategy and strategic plan of the Department of Education? I don't know if I found anybody that knew what that was, and so I think the first goal that we're doing is we have to create a vision of what that department is serving and what they're trying to do. And one of my directives to folks is it's got to be simple. I mean, some of the comprehensive plans that go out there, really, the common person doesn't know what you're talking about. So my goal is to have a one-page vision about what the department's to do and strategies to do it and what the goals are. So I always say, you know, I'm from Farmer, Ohio. So I'd like somebody in Farmer, Ohio to look at this one page and say, this is what Department of Ed does, and nod their head yes. Hopefully not this way. But
You mentioned that you would return to the issue of preschool readiness. And our understanding is that about a third of youngsters who enter Columbus schools are not ready. Another third need a lot of help. This is also true often in districts like Whitehall or Southwestern. What are your thoughts about improving readiness for kindergarten?
well, one of the things that we think is important is this early childhood grant that allows for an evaluation. Sometimes in government there's an inclination to throw money at something before you know if it works. And I think this is the framework to determine what is working, what isn't working, and I think once we determine that, then we know that early childhood is a gateway to success in schools, in particular third grade reading. I mean, those are the two cornerstones, in my opinion, of early childhood.
What's your feeling? Is this something that schools needs to do all by itself, or should they involve community partners, Head Start programs, existing preschool programs? What's your thinking about that?
All the above. All the above. The more that we, as a community, say we need to educate our children, and we bring that power, that energy of the community together, the better off we are.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned the Columbus Education Commission, appointed by Mayor Michael Coleman, and his one of his senior staff, Steve Campbell, is here, and City Council President Andy Ginther, who is here with us, and David Harrison, who actually served on the commission. Does this have the potential to be a rare example of bipartisan cooperation in the next 6 weeks?
I certainly hope so. It appears to be. I mean, I've not been entwined closely with that, but it appears to be that way. You know, I had the opportunity when I was retired to be chairman of the Academic Distress Commission for Youngstown. One of my chagrins was that I didn't sense a community coming together when I first went into Youngstown and say, there should be a sense of outrage about our children here. And so one of the first things we did was start community building to bring the components together and say, we have to do better for our boys and girls. And so I think that's what I'm seeing and feeling here with the Columbus plan.
There are over 100,000 youngsters statewide, over 22,000 here in Columbus, or in Franklin County, who are in public charter schools. What's your thinking about school choice and about charter schools? And one issue I know that we'll have people interested is there a way to close some of these persistently low-performing charter schools?
Well, just from my history, just if people don't know, Reynoldsburg, when I was there, started two of the early community schools in Ohio. We started a virtual school probably in one of the earliest years, and subsequently another community school. I was also involved with the Ohio Scholarship Development Plan that later led to the Cleaver Voucher Program with Governor Voinovich. So I am a supporter of choice. I think that is important. I think it's important for moms and dads and for kids. I just think those opportunities should be there.
What do we do about this issue of quality?
The quality issue, I think, I was speaking down at Shawnee State once, and I talked about the fact that needed to be quality schools, and they asked me about closing community schools that were not performing well, and I said we ought to close that school. But I said we ought to be closing some schools in traditional brick and mortar that aren't successful also. The bottom line is all our children need to have an opportunity to be in a quality school. They need it. We got to work for that. And if we aren't getting that in either in a traditional K-12 school or a community school, I think we need to do that. And just so everybody knows, we probably have closed, I think, 22 or 23 community schools in this state as of now. Now, just as an aside, we do have a category of schools called dropout recovery schools, which is a whole different world. In Reynoldsburg, I think it was the Trailblazer program we started there, where we actually went out into the community to kids that had dropped out of school and drug them back in and had them work with some of our employers, some of our business people about trades and skills that they need. And we were pretty successful in making sure that they would graduate and have some skills, but that's hard. That's a hard thing, and it's just a little different than a normal traditional school. So a little caveat on dropout recovery schools.
One of the traditions of the Metropolitan Club is that those of you in the audience get to ask questions, not speeches, but questions, and we'll invite those. Please come to the microphone and identify yourself. And while you're coming up, please go ahead and identify yourself and your question, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Karen Carver, and I'm a speech-language pathology clinical instructor here at the Ohio State University, and I have a short introduction and then a question for Dr. Ross. According to the American Speech and Hearing Association, speech-language pathologists have the specialized knowledge needed to address the key elements of reading instruction: sensitivity to the sounds of our language, sound-letter correspondence, understanding of word meanings, and comprehension of spoken and written language as defined by the National Reading Panel. The state of Ohio already employs licensed and certified speech-language pathologists who are uniquely qualified to offer a multisensory approach to reading instruction. As Superintendent of Public Instruction, Dr. Ross, would you support an amendment to state law which included speech-language pathologists on the approved list of reading specialists as specified in Senate Bill 21. I knew I was going to flub that last one. The third grade reading guarantee.
Let me answer it this way. I've been trying to get Project More to comply with that requirements of the law, and I haven't been successful with that yet either. So, I mean, complying with what the requirements are to be a reading specialist under the current law are a little bit cumbersome. I want to tell you that there is some efforts going on to try to make that requirement a little less cumbersome so we can have a broader scope of who can actually go into our classroom and teach reading. It seems to me that we're doing all these input requirements for superintendents. I think we could put the output requirements and say, Mr. Superintendent, Madam Principal, you have a job to get your kids to read. Why am I telling you what your certification should be for your teacher in that classroom? You get someone in the classroom that actually have the student be successful. We need to do that, worry about the outcomes, focus on the outcomes more, and hold the principals, superintendents accountable and teachers accountable for making sure it happens.
Thank you. I would add that speech-language pathologists are already employed in every public school in the state. You wouldn't have to pay us any additional dollars.
All right.
And we're already
Next-
qualified to
Next
do
question,
so.
please.
So
Next
thank you very
question.
much.
All right.
Hi, I'm Tasha Booker with I Know I Can. And I recently completed my graduate degree in education because I felt called to teach. I'm not teaching yet. But you talked a lot about student success and the teacher's impact on student success. Can you talk a little bit about how we can really engage the broader community first to really take education seriously and to really recruit kind of second career teachers? I think me having a career before going into the classroom really helped the students, really engage them in understanding. And I really think that that's where, as you talk about career tech, that was my specialty, my degree is in that. But how, you know, the community can really get involved and how we can recruit some engaged teachers.
Hugely important issue, and I think from a couple perspectives, we need to, one, I was reading an article that someone gave me in my office called Irreplaceables. And they were talking about classroom teachers of high quality that left urban schools in this country after a year or two. The reason they left wasn't because of money. It wasn't because of money. It was because they were treated the same as everyone else. Acclamation was given to everyone. It wasn't signaled on them, even though they were achieving significantly higher. And the problem is when we lose those quality teachers in our schools, we're really losing. So in the short term, I think we need to do in our schools, in urban schools and across the state, we need to actually know and identify who those irreplaceable teachers are and do everything we can to make sure they stay. Secondly, I think we need to be talking to our colleges of education about entrance requirements and expectations, and I want to tell you that's happening. The Board of Regents is engaged in that actively now, and I think we're looking at Department of Ed licensure. I think about expectations of the skills and knowledge that our teachers need to be in the classroom. Heard hundreds of teachers said, well, I was never taught how to teach reading in my College of Education. I was just shocked. I said, really? And so you have an elementary teaching certificate, but you have one class in teaching reading. The single most important thing, the complete focus of what our elementary school should be about, we're teaching one course in reading in our universities. And so I think wake-up calls are going everywhere now as we're beating the drum about we have to give our youngsters these skills, in particular in reading, and anybody that knows me know I just beat that drum hard because I know what happens if a student can't read by the end of third grade. I know what happens, and none of it's good. None of it's good. The other part, just to go a different direction, is I want to talk about hopefulness. Because reading in third grade and hopefulness at fifth grade. Hopefulness, if a student feels hopeful about themselves and their future by fifth grade, it's a better predictor of college success, Herb, than the ACT score. So, you know, as we think about how we're interacting with youngsters in the early ages, we need to give them the skills, but we need them to feel good about themselves. Now, you can't be separated either. They're tongue and groove together. And I think we need to be aware of that and talk more about that because the students' hopefulness and their reading skills, I think, are a huge predictor, probably a better predictor about student success. I don't know if I answered your question.
Hi, I'm Bonnie James. I own a company for 35 years called Advanced Reading Concepts, and we teach people to read faster and understand more. And I have enjoyed hearing you speak because now I have a lot more understanding than what I read and, you know, without hearing you speak. But my big concern is that when I talk to teachers and educators and we get the kids who need hope, the teens and tweens and adults who hate themselves in school and get them the confidence to go on. And there's practical tools I teach them, just how to read a textbook. They're not taught that. They're taught to do chapter 1. They're never taught these simple little things. They assume that somebody taught them back in grade school. Now, my biggest concern is what I see is people with the standards that you set that are very good, all they're worried about is having kids pass a test. And they're taught because of the No Child Gets Ahead program. They're all taught the same way. Even in Upper Arlington, where my grandson went, he was reading in phrases.
Need to ask a question,
Okay,
please.
I want to know, how do you get the teachers who worried about a test score to teach the individuals and the children so they have the hope that you want instead of a test score? Because a test score
Okay,
isn't
thank you.
that.
Let me answer it this way. I think that in Reynoldsburg, we probably didn't talk about test scores. We talked about expectations and about the learning we wanted our students to have. One of the things that you talk about differentiating instruction, my own son, I told you about him. I mean, he probably should have been in a differentiated classroom. And I'm sure we tried in Reynoldsburg many, many times. But there's not a one-size-fits-all in education. We need a differentiated type instruction for different children. I would say the one teacher, 25 students in a classroom probably works for maybe 40 to 50% of our kids, but not the rest of them. I mean, it really didn't work greatly in high school for my son, so we need to do that. But as far as the testing, we shouldn't even talk about the test. We have the expectations. We should see this is the skills and knowledge that you're expected to have. So let's talk about the skills and knowledge. And guess what? Guess what? Test is just going to happen, and we're going to do great, just like Reynoldsburg does.
Hi, I'm Sue Tobin. I'm with Disability Rights Ohio. Ohio has over 260,000 students with disabilities, and I wondered what your plans are to improve the persistent achievement gaps that exist.
The gaps are the same, similar to what it is with our minority students, our ESL students, and I think, and I'll go back, I think this is about expectations. I don't like to tell stories out of shop, but I got a letter, I will. Got a letter from a teacher that was complaining about their LD teacher, or LD student having to learn the same material and take the same assessment. And I said, the inclination was that they can't be successful doing that. I want to tell you that those students can be successful. We have to expect it of them. You know, when I was in Reynoldsburg, I remember proctoring a assessment to a TBI student, traumatically brain injured student, and he asked me 3 times as I was proctoring the test if this was the same test all the other kids took. I said yes, and that's what he wanted to take. Now, he did all right, didn't pass, but he wanted to take that test. We need to set our expectations for all our children at a level. They're not, if we expect less from the children, guess what? That's where they're going to achieve, less. If we expect more, they'll grow. We've seen this in Ohio year in, year out. I've been around long enough to look 12, 20 years ago where we went through a structure like this again, and you know, the superintendents, principals, and teachers responded. That's why under the old standards, we have 61% or 60% of our schools excellent or excellent with distinction. They've succeeded under the old method. Now the standards or expectations are very too low that compared to where they need to be. But I have no doubt that the principals, superintendents, teachers are going to respond to these higher expectations. They're going to achieve it. The only question is, how long? How long?
Thank you. I'm Jane Scott. I'm a real big proponent of teachers being held responsible, and I happen to have a very good friend, and I think she teaches reading intervention, and I actually think she's in the Reynoldsburg system, but that's an accident, okay? She has the toughest class she's ever had, and she's very, very frustrated because she is going to be held accountable, which she understands, but she has a group of students this year that she and her partner, teacher, have done everything but stand on their heads, and the kids have no motivation whatsoever, no motivation coming from the parents, no motivation coming from home, no motivation to even be there. We've talked an awful lot about the schools, the state, the teachers. Is there a plan? What can we do about these parents who send their kids to school with an attitude that they don't really need to be there and it's not important?
Well, we can't legislate that. I mean, I've always believed that we can only deal what we can deal with. I mean, the things we can control. Now, would I love to have parents engaged in? Yes. Yes, absolutely. I know when I was going to school, I had a lot of adults engaged in guiding me or trying to guide me. And I think that's different. That's one of the reasons I've heard the project more, because this communication between intergenerations just doesn't happen with our youngsters now. They don't talk to their grandparents because they're in a different state or a different part of the country. So, but I think it's about engagement. I think we need to be talking to parents. As a leader, when I first went to Reynoldsburg, I felt like our school staff had higher expectations for the boys and girls than the community did. Part of my job as a leader of that, educational leader of that community is say, this is important. It is my obligation to convey that message. The education is important and you need to get engaged. And we did all right after, it's not easy. I mean, but you have to be upfront and say, this is our expectation because this is important if you want your child to have the jobs and careers and opportunities that you want them to have. And I think it's about engaging parents early on, and that starts as soon as they come into a school district. And I know here, a couple years ago, had an entry criteria where when all new parents that came in went through a kind of an orientation. I just think that's a wonderful way to go. Not an easy solution because you can't say, you should be a good parent. I mean,
So last question will come from me, which is, and several people in the audience asked me to ask this question, which is, tell us about what motivates you. I think we can agree that being the superintendent of schools, public instruction in the state of Ohio is a very challenging job, as is the job of teaching or being a principal or being a local superintendent. What motivates you to seek these kinds of improvements?
when I retired the first and second time, I got a call because I was working with the helping out in the governor's office, and I got a call from the governor's office to come in. And just want to tell you, when the governor asks you to go to work for him, he's a hard person to say no to, especially somebody I hold in such high regard. And so when he did ask me, I jumped at the opportunity for that, the opportunity to work with him, but also to advocate for boys and girls across the state. And when, as I looked at that position, I was involved in creating, developing and advocating, making sure laws passed. But that's the easy part in reality. The hard part is after the laws have been passed is implementation. And so when the state superintendency became open, I said, this is put up or shut up time. I mean, really, you did a lot of this, so let's make it happen. And so really, and it's really about, I think that expectations and a proper structure, leadership is just huge, that we can get this done, and we have to get it done to help the boys and girls of Ohio and this country.
Rich?
Well, thank you. I think I think this speaks well for the stewardship of schools in Ohio, and if hopefulness is something that fifth graders need, we could use a little too, and we have some. Thank you. I hope you enjoyed today's forum. You can see it again and share it with friends on YouTube. And there's a link on our website. You can continue the conversation out in the lobby with coffee and cookies. Before you leave, I want you to make reservations for next week's forum. Again, Columbus State and Columbus State College Foundation is going to present the second half of this, Education Equation, Neighborhoods' Impact on Children. So once again, let's thank today's sponsors, Columbus State Community College, Columbus State Community College Foundation, and most importantly, Superintendent Ross and Mark Reel. Thank you.